there is a strange pattern that runs through history. Welcome to the Sebcast, the home of the #1 network for your life. This is where we hear stories anew, look deeper, and discover together how Jesus works today. Sometimes it's not the ignorant people who miss the greatest things. Sometimes it's exactly those who know the most. Consider a well-known example from the technology world. In the 1970s, a few engineers at a large company developed a new device that could capture photos electronically. It was essentially the first digital camera. The technology was revolutionary. But management dismissed it. Why? Because they were a film company. And according to their existing model, the idea didn't make sense. They understood the current system so well that they couldn't see how the world was changing. Knowledge can sometimes become a framework within which everything has to fit. And when something doesn't fit in that framework, we ignore it. Something similar occurs in the Bible. The people most familiar with the scriptures, the scribes and Pharisees, understood precisely how the biblical story unfolded. They knew the prophecies, the laws, and the history. But they still overlooked the greatest part of that story. Jesus highlighted this in John 5:39-40. You study the scriptures diligently because you think that in them you have eternal life. These are the very scriptures that testify about me, yet you refuse to come to me to have life. It's an incredible statement. Jesus basically said, you know the text, but you miss the point. It's possible to read the Bible and still miss the story. How does that happen? Because we all tend to interpret new information through our existing framework, we see what we expect to see. The first Christians had to overcome this issue themselves. They held a certain idea of how God works, a specific idea of what a Messiah looks like, and a particular idea of how salvation should occur. And then something occurred that didn't fit into their categories. Suddenly they had to admit, perhaps we misunderstood the story. That's one of the most difficult things for anyone to do, to acknowledge that your knowledge isn't the complete picture. But it's also one of the most freeing moments in faith, because when people stop merely defending their own frameworks, they begin to discover something new. They realize that the Bible isn't just a collection of ideas, it's a story that points to someone. And when people make that realization, faith begins to shift. It no longer remains merely an intellectual pursuit, it transforms into a relationship. And that's precisely where community becomes so vital. Because no one learns these things entirely alone, we discover them together through conversations, questions, and learning to live out the story of Jesus as a community. That's why, as a congregation, we talk about being the top network for your life. Not just a place where people gain knowledge, but a network of relationships where people discover together what it means to follow Jesus at home, at work, and in the normal rhythm of life. Sometimes people don't miss the truth because they lack knowledge. Other times they overlook it because they are overly confident in what they already believe. One of the greatest dangers in faith is believing we already know everything. When we cease asking questions, stop listening, and halt our growth. Decide today to stay teachable intentionally. Read a passage from the Bible with fresh eyes. Listen to someone else's perspective. Talk to someone in your network about faith. Sometimes we find God not when we talk more, but when we start listening again. Until tomorrow, take care.